little PayPal gadget. It costs 70 quid off eBay. I'm quite happy to stick my credit card into it. It's a brand, a trusted brand. Business models that were solid, rock solid. You know, so you could stand up here a few years ago and say, so what you need to sell stuff, to be a retailer is, you need a shop, obviously. You need a warehouse. You need staff working there, and you need a till. Of course, you don't need any of that stuff. You don't need to make, you know, none of it. The model of retail has been fully subverted. Models of authority are fully subverted. All sorts of models in finance are fully subverted. In mobile banking are fully subverted. So the half-life of lethargy is decreasing all the time. So your ability to just weather the storm is decreasing all the time. You know, the organisation will sink faster and faster if they're unable to adapt. Speed of messaging supports that. Organisations that operate 9 to 5 discover that at 5:01 something caught fire, and by 8:59 the next morning, it's around the world. You hear this, people who get on a plane and send some stupid tweet, and by the time they land in Mumbai, they've been fired. They didn't even realise it, they've just sat there in first class drinking a gin and tonic. Speed of messaging, amplification. The evolved nature of authority. So Mozilla, the Mozilla Foundation, to make Firefox, the browser, there's a guy appointed, Brendan Ike was appointed to be the chairman of that. It's a prestigious role. It's bestowed by the community. It's a charitable foundation. He wrote JavaScript, so if you ever had, Sam could tell us what JavaScript is, but for me it's like, you know, bit of code, it makes menus work. That's what it says on Wikipedia. So he was one of the people that created that. High social authority, high reputation, got a great job, brilliant. 4 weeks into it, turned out that 5 years ago he made a donation of $1,000, I think, to a perfectly legitimate campaigning body against Proposition 6, I always get this wrong, Proposition 8, the American campaign against equal marriage. And that got out on Twitter. Suddenly it's everywhere. A lot of outcry from the community. They don't like that. You know, Mozilla's supposed to be a bit above all of that. It's supposed to be good. And here's this guy, and he's actually made a campaign. He's made a donation to a campaigning body. Perfectly legitimate. He's entitled to his views. But then what happened was his director of education, I can't remember her name, the lady, she lower positional authority than he had. She wrote a blog. It was a nice blog. It was a good blog, just supportive, saying, yeah, you know, okay, nice guy, it's a great company. But I'm just having a tad of trouble understanding how, if I'm not equal in that part of my life, how am I equal in any part of my life? How can I be equal? How can I be treated equally in this organisation? And in that moment, her social authority rocketed. But the organisation still, go, you know, throw up the bastions, bring up the drawbridge. I didn't draw a drawbridge. Ignore it. But the speed of messaging was immense. 3 days later, he's gone. And her authority disappeared. Really, her social authority is gone. If she starts talking about something else, Scottish independence, well, I'm not that interested, you know. She's got no social authority in that area. In that moment, she had contextual social authority that fully subverted the formal might of the organisation. Shared stories of change. We can share these stories so easily. Subversive social communities for good in the NHS, but they're used elsewhere to bring other organisations down. You know, put hashtag Monsanto and see what comes up. Hashtag GM. You know, subversive stories. Amplification of co-education. Just this is about speed. It's all facilitated by the technology. It's about speed. It's everything assaulting this formal bastion. The democratisation of publishing is really the ultimate thing. We can all have an opinion, but now we can all share it. And we can vote it up. And that's the big change. That's what that one's all about. It's really the forces are saying in the organisation. Loads of good stuff, you know.
More questions?
Yeah. Slightly nervous about asking this, but here we go. The story you just talked about, the story you just talked about kind of came up in my mind a bit earlier on when we were talking about sense making in communities, and particularly around social reputation. So if you're in a large corporate, you have a need to maintain a certain amount of order and balance to make sure that your corporate functions as it does.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll say that and then put that aside. Then if you think about the people who have huge social reputations for reasons that aren't necessarily, let's just say, valid for now. So celebrities.
Yeah.
Pop stars who comment on things that they know nothing about, according to you. Okay, so then you have a big social reputation. Now, what's to stop that kind of thing happening inside a large organisation. So people who think they have a very valid view, they've got a huge social reputation, and then it affects the organisation in a way that is negative for the organisation.
Yeah.
So I mean, maybe it's not a question, maybe it's a comment, and really interested in your thoughts on that.
I think it's fascinating. You see that happening. So you see organisations that create social spaces because they think it will help them get their compliance training done, and then suddenly everybody's in there talking about the stuff, and there's this huge groundswell of opinion that's unleashed. Crikey, you know, we thought we were talking about this. Everyone wants to talk about that. Well, on the plus side, that's a good thing to know. You know, you might as well know it. But it probably comes down partly to what the nature of the organisation is. We talk about organisations, but that's a sort of fictional construct. It's really about individuals. So maybe it's right that if people have an authority, if a lot of people are getting behind it, maybe that's an indicator. If we think about those levels of narrative, if the individual and the co-created group narrative are starting to take you in a direction, maybe the organisation needs to be willing to rewrite its story. So I do work around a model of change, which is about the cost of being in a culture. So if I worked for, let's say I've got a young family, so I need a job, and I get a job with BP, which is great, but I might not agree with some of the stuff they're doing, but I might be prepared to, you work for BP? No. All right. I might be prepared to put it to one side, because my priority is my family, so the salary I want. But there's a cost. I'm probably not going to put up on Facebook, what a great first day at BP, because some of my friends would judge me for that. There's always a cost of belonging to a culture. And that's interesting because we have to recognise that, because we use as a society very simplistic models of judgment. So we say, oh, the banks are really bad because of those blooming bonuses. What's wrong with people making loads of money? Why not? You know, there's a space for those people. They've got different pressures within this kind of model. So I think we have to recognise the difference within organisations, but probably also listen to those voices when they come up.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Yeah, of course.
So, yeah, thank you for that, and that's really valid. So then, if you think about the Mozilla question, so this is ultimately about someone who has a view of society that is different to another person's view, or perhaps the majority of other people's view of society, but it's a legitimately held view in a perfectly legal way.
Yeah.
Okay. The guy who invented JavaScript could have done some very good things from Mozilla and could have taken it into a very good way, but the community decided that he shouldn't.
Yeah.
Okay, in that model, you can make up. You can kind of see. I'm not sure whether or not I'm particularly happy with that democratization, but anyway. But then, if you think about how that works in a large corporate, which I presume lots of people are working in, that can become incredibly scary.
Quite right.
And so the examples you gave in the answer, Ben, was you're right. If it's something that needs to be told and something that needs to be found out, that's all well and good. I'm not asking how do you stop it when it goes wrong, but how do we make sure that we are not creating a place for ourselves that is actually very dangerous in value adding for the person who's gone to BP, who is enjoying their work but doesn't necessarily agree with fracking in the middle of the ocean and killing babysitters or whatever you do.
And quite right, that's really scary. Yeah, if I was in the castle, I'd be pretty scared about it. So I'm not advocating this, I'm just saying this is the reality. This is the reality of where we are. So, you know, the other story is around the police crime commissioner in Kent and Harris Brown, a youth police crime, 14 years old, sends out some tweets that are sort of, maybe homophobic, maybe not, they're just sort of nonsense that 14-year-olds say. And then 2 years later is judged for it. No different. She's a different person then. Her argument is, I don't believe that now, but I'll resign anyway. Are we all white to the white? Everybody says things that are dark. How judgmental do we want to be? Well, that's not my judgment call, it's the permanence of data which is the issue. How permanent is stuff? And huge challenges for organisations, but I think this is exactly it, because they're not even often recognising it, that's why they get swept away. You're just washed away, because that lethargy not even trying to engage in it, is what will make them redundant.
I think the other thing that you brought to the fore today, which I'm really pleased about, is that technology is not a neutral, doesn't operate in a neutral space. It operates in a political, social context where people have different levels of power and can exercise that. And it's kind of writ large with social media, which means that ethics and those sorts of issues.
So the really interesting thing for me, if we take it away from the extreme edges, let's say you work in a global company which has offices in Saudi, and I don't know, let's say you get seconded over to the Saudi office. That's okay. Well, God forbid, because you can't drive if you're over there, and people will treat you differently. Now, we've always dealt with that in sort of Western liberal companies by just kind of in the office it'll be okay, we expect everybody to behave by the same rules. But as soon as we go into social spaces, so I can sit in Bournemouth talking to a colleague in somewhere else in the world who has different ethical, moral views. I might be in a community with people who judge people for being gay, for being a woman, for being old, young, doesn't matter what it is. The point is, suddenly, we're all in one space. We're not separated by geography anymore. Now, how do we deal with that at an organisational level? And how do we deal with it at a personal ethic level? So is it moral cowardice to step away from it, even though you might be doing a big change project, but I want to talk to you about your views about, whatever it is. And that's difficult. And very few organisations are even touching that yet. We just thought it's kind of laissez-faire, leave it alone, it's all okay, come out in the wash. Do we allow people to form ghettos? We're separated by geography at the moment. That's why we have different views on things. That's why things are different. I was furious last week, all over Facebook, about editing Doctor Who to take out the kiss, just because I've got no problem. People can have different laws, different views in different parts of the world. It felt like a little bit of moral cowardice from the BBC to edit it just to sell it. That's a bit cheeky.
And on that Doctor Who note, I'm afraid we need to draw a session to an end. Thank you, Julian. That's really thoughtful. I think Julian's going to be around for the rest of the day, so you've got
Round about.
Yeah.
Thank you.